You've probably been told that cholesterol is the enemy, that high cholesterol means heart disease, and that statins are the only way to lower your risk. But what if everything you knew about cholesterol was wrong? If you've ever looked at your cholesterol numbers and had no idea what they actually mean, or you're frustrated because one doctor tells you you need medication and another says you're fine, this video will clear up the confusion once and for all. And by the end of the video, you'll understand cholesterol better than most doctors that are still following outdated mainstream medical advice. Here's what we're diving into: why cholesterol is important to your health, where it comes from, what the different types mean, who is responsible for the current confusion around cholesterol, when you should actually be concerned, and lastly, how to understand your numbers and how to improve your health without unnecessary medication. Stick with me and you'll be able to confidently interpret your cholesterol numbers like a pro. And don't just take it from me. I've done thousands of hours of research on this, but everything I've learned and I'm about to share on this is from the work of some amazing doctors and scientists that are pushing the boundaries of our own understanding on this topic. Many of them have risked their careers and their reputations by speaking up on this topic to educate the public, so we really owe it to them. And there are many others out there that are speaking about this that aren't on this slide, but these are a few that I've learned the most from. So let's get into it. Why is cholesterol important? Well, cholesterol is not the villain. Here are 4 things that it's absolutely essential for. The first is cell structure. Every single cell in your body relies on cholesterol to maintain flexibility and function. Cholesterol is a building block in all of your cell membranes. The second is hormone production. Your body needs cholesterol to make important hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and cortisol. The third is digestion and nutrient absorption. Your liver uses cholesterol to produce bile, which allows you to break down and digest fats and absorb vitamins like A, D, E, and K. And lastly, cholesterol is critical for your brain function and your nervous system. Your brain is about 2% of your body's weight, but it uses about 20% of your body's cholesterol. And it needs it to repair itself and function properly. Most of the cholesterol in your brain is used for myelin, which acts like the insulation on a fiber optic cable, allowing you to transfer data effectively. So you need it for learning, focus, memory, and just everyday thinking. Right now, when you're watching this, your brain is using cholesterol. So where does cholesterol come from? Well, your body gets it from 2 primary places. Your liver naturally produces cholesterol because of all the important functions it plays that we just went over. And you also get cholesterol from your diet when you eat animal-based foods like meats, eggs, and dairy. And as I just referenced, your brain produces some cholesterol as well. But here's what most people don't realize. Eating cholesterol doesn't automatically raise your blood cholesterol. In fact, it has very little to no impact on your blood cholesterol. Because based on how much you consume, your liver just adjusts how much cholesterol it's producing. So if dietary cholesterol isn't the issue, then what is? Well, let me quickly explain the energy transportation system in your body. Your body has a complex cholesterol transportation system, but I'm gonna try and break it down to be as simple as possible. Think of it like a highway for energy delivery and storage. Here's how it works. Your liver is the command center. And the liver's job is to transform what you eat and drink into usable or storable energy. It's like a shipping facility where trucks come to and from to deliver and pick up resources. So your liver takes carbohydrates and protein in your diet, and it converts some of them as glycogen to be stored in the liver and in muscle tissue. And the rest of it converts into triglycerides, which is a form of fat. And then the triglycerides are loaded onto a molecule called VLDL, or very low density lipoprotein. And this molecule is really the start of the lipid pathway. So triglycerides are like the storage boxes that are storing carbohydrates and protein that's been broken down into carbohydrates. And then that is loaded onto the shipping trucks. And the shipping trucks are these lipoproteins that start out as VLDL, then travels throughout your bloodstream, and it drops off the triglycerides or the fat for storage in your fat cells. And then after it delivers the cargo, the VLDL turns into LDL, or low density lipoprotein. And then LDL carries the remaining resources, including cholesterol, to your tissues for repair and for energy use. HDL, on the other hand, high-density lipoprotein acts as the cleanup crew. So it goes out to your cells and it picks up excess cholesterol and returns it to the liver for processing or disposal. But here's where it gets interesting. The size of your LDL is really what tells the story. Just to recap, your liver starts by packaging up carbohydrates into triglycerides and then loading them on the VLDL with other resources. The VLDL then brings those resources to your fat cells to drop off the cargo. So the contents and the size of what's loaded on that VLDL depends on what your body is producing or receiving. So if your liver is a net producer of triglycerides, that means you're eating an excess of carbohydrates or protein. Therefore, the VLDL is large and it's packed full of triglycerides that are holding those carbohydrates. And when this large VLDL reaches the fat cell and drops off its cargo, it transforms into small, dense LDL. That's the type of LDL that is much more likely to get caught in your arteries and lead to plaque and heart disease. But on the other hand, if your liver is receiving fat for energy use and not as many carbohydrates, such as a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet, the VLDL starts out pretty small and empty, like a shipping truck that doesn't have much cargo. And then when it gets to the fat cell, it picks up more fat and it becomes larger and buoyant. So it's called large buoyant LDL, which is far less harmful than the small dense LDL. This is why sugar-heavy diets increase your small dense LDL and thus your risk for heart disease, while fat-heavy diets promote large buoyant LDL, which don't increase your risk for heart disease. And meanwhile, HDL continues to help you maintain balance by removing excess cholesterol from the bloodstream, ensuring that it doesn't build up where it shouldn't. And that's why HDL is frequently referred to as good cholesterol. But when we think about what's commonly referred to as bad cholesterol, your LDL, the real issue isn't the LDL itself, it's the pattern or the size of the LDL and the cause behind it. So before we get to understanding your numbers, you might be wondering, how did we get here and who is responsible for this confusion? Well, as with many things, our understanding of cholesterol has been shaped by outdated research and industry influence. A big element to the demonization of cholesterol came from the diet heart hypothesis in the mid-20th century, which suggested that dietary fat and cholesterol contributed to heart disease. This theory was largely pushed by Ancel Keys, who cherry-picked data from his famous 7-country study to show a link between saturated fat and heart disease. But here's what he conveniently left out: the countries that had high-fat diets and very low rates of heart disease. The food and pharmaceutical industries ran with this research regardless, which led to the rise of the low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet, which is a huge factor in what we've seen in increases in obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And let's not forget the development of statin drugs, which are now a multi-billion-dollar industry. So many doctors are trained to focus just on lowering LDL without actually addressing the root cause of the issue, which we're about to get to. This idea that high LDL alone contributes to heart disease has been debunked by a number of different studies. Here's a meta-analysis of 19 different studies involving over 68,000 individuals. And what did they discover? The people with low LDL had the highest rates of death relating to cardiovascular disease. You cannot make this up. They actually concluded that high LDL-C is inversely correlated to mortality in most people over 60. So why are we still confused? Well, it runs pretty deep. The roots of this misunderstanding go back even further than Ancel Keys. Back to the early 20th century when John D. Rockefeller reshaped medical education. Rockefeller's funding led to a standardized, pharmaceutical-driven medical curriculum, focused heavily on medications over holistic treatments. This meant that doctors were trained to treat lab numbers instead of the individual patients. The Flexner Report was published in 1910, funded by Rockefeller and Carnegie, and it eliminated schools that focused on nutrition and natural healing. As a result, the entire medical industry became pharmaceutical first. And they went so far as to discredit any institutions promoting natural or holistic treatments. Doctors were trained and still are to memorize dosages and types of different pharmaceutical drugs, including statins. And this influence, combined with Ansel Keys' flawed studies, has led to decades of misinformation about cholesterol and heart disease. And the Flexner report sadly hasn't changed in over 100 years. So medical school curriculums teach doctors to treat an algorithm, not a patient. Meaning most doctors look at numbers and conclude, well, high LDL needs to be treated. But I want to be really clear about something. Individual doctors are not the ones to blame here. And more of them are waking up to this. And the good news is there are easy tests that you can get or ask your doctor to prescribe that measure the actual risk factors for you, the individual, not the algorithm. And that's what I'm going to explain in just a moment. So what really causes plaque? Most doctors blame LDL, but as you now know, that's an incomplete story. The real root cause? Inflammation. Think of your arteries like a road. When there's an accident that causes damage from inflammation, LDL arrives on the scene with cholesterol to help patch it up. And if the road keeps getting damaged, these layers of patchwork and cholesterol build up and lead to plaque formation. It's as if you were going along a highway and every time you saw an accident, you concluded that ambulances were the ones leading to the accidents because they were always on the scene. So what really causes inflammation? Well, it's a number of things. Excess sugar and processed carbohydrates, chronically high insulin levels, oxidative stress, smoking, chronic stress, autoimmune disorders. But if you reduce inflammation, cholesterol is no longer an issue. So now what you've been waiting for, how to interpret your test results. First, I want to start by saying, forget your total cholesterol. It's irrelevant. Here's what actually matters. You want to make sure your HDL cholesterol is above 50 and ideally above 60. LDL alone as a measurement isn't going to tell you much. So you want to understand your LDL size. How much of your LDL is those large buoyant LDL particles that are lower risk? And how much of your LDL are those small dense LDL particles that are higher risk? For your triglycerides, ideally you want them below 100. And one of the most important ratios you should be aware of is your triglyceride to HDL ratio. Aside from testing insulin itself, this is your best proxy for your insulin sensitivity. So you definitely want that ratio to be below 2, but ideally below 1.5. Anything above 4 suggests you have some insulin resistance. And on that note, if you can get your fasting insulin tested, do it. You want it to be below 6 and ideally even below 5 or 4. You also want to look at your CRP or your C-reactive protein. This is a really important marker for inflammation and you want this to be below 1. And uric acid, which is on most standard tests, is another great marker for inflammation. For men, you definitely want that below 5.5. For women, you have a little bit more wiggle room, but below 6.5. The bottom line is, if your doctor just looks at your LDL and suggests you should be on a statin because it's high, without actually looking at and discussing with you the other markers of inflammation happening in your body, they're missing the full picture and you're not getting the best possible treatment. And if you're worried at all about your plaque buildup, you can always ask your doctor for a CAC score, which will actually show you how much plaque is built up in your arteries. CAC stands for coronary arterial calcium score. So what do you do if you're already on a statin? Well, you need to work with your doctor, but you should talk to them or a coach about dietary changes above all else. There's a time and a place where statins can be helpful, but they are dramatically overprescribed to lower LDL cholesterol. And oftentimes they run the risk of doing more harm than good because of all the things your body needs cholesterol for. They block cholesterol production in the brain so they can prevent critical repairs and the brain cell function and overall brain function, leading to long-term damage. And for many people, the risk of statins, including liver damage, muscle weakness, and increased risk for diabetes, outweigh the benefits, especially if their inflammatory markers are low. At a minimum, if you're taking a statin, your doctor should have recommended to you already that you should be supplementing with CoQ10, which is a critical antioxidant that your body produces and you also get from your diet, which is blocked with statins. Lowering inflammation naturally is the key to improving your cholesterol numbers and your overall heart health. Here are the most effective strategies. Optimize your eating window. A good balance is to aim for 2 meals a day, ideally between a 6 to 8 hour window. This extended fasting period helps your liver shift from being an energy producer to an energy recipient, reducing unnecessary fat storage and inflammation. And if you're concerned, you may want to shorten it even further and try a 4-hour eating window, or even attempt a 24-hour fast once or twice a week. It doesn't need to be every single day. Think of your eating window like a tool. It doesn't need to be the same every single day. And if you're someone that's not super concerned and you're already in great health, you have a little bit more flexibility here. So you can eat in a variable window up to, I would say, 10 hours a day. Intermittent fasting is one of the easiest ways to increase your HDL and also change the size of your LDL to promote more large, fluffy, buoyant LDL and less of the small, dense LDL that can increase your risk for heart disease. It also helps you lose weight, recycle damaged cells, and become more insulin resistant. Overall, it's just a very powerful practice for longevity. Number 2 is to eat more nutrient-dense foods. Increase healthy animal fats from sources like grass-fed beef, wild-caught fish, eggs, and organ meats. Prioritize anti-inflammatory fats like omega-3s from salmon, sardines, walnuts, or flax seeds, and try your best to avoid the ultra-processed seed and vegetable oils. In an ideal world, you'd want to cut out all refined carbohydrates and added sugar from ultra-processed foods because they only contribute to insulin resistance and chronic inflammation. And if you're still watching this video thinking that saturated fat and cholesterol are still the enemy, here's a personal anecdote just to give you a little bit more data. I eat almost zero processed foods, but I've been having 4 eggs a day for the last 5 years, and 4 to 5 days a week, I have red meat or chicken, some form of animal protein. And my total LDL is still under 100. The other thing you want to try and do is exercise regularly, but also be smart about it. You want to incorporate strength training and low impact movement like walking and yoga to support metabolic flexibility, your ability to change between running on fats or carbohydrates for energy. High intensity exercise is also a great addition, but you want to be careful with the intensity of your exercise if you're already inflamed because it can temporarily spike oxidative stress. Exercise, as you probably already know, will help your cardiovascular health in a dozen different ways. But when it comes to cholesterol, it's another factor to turn your liver into a net recipient of energy and lower inflammation. You also want to prioritize quality sleep and stress reduction. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of deep sleep per night because poor sleep is linked to increased inflammation and insulin resistance. And you can practice stress management techniques like meditation or breath work or even time in nature, which will reduce cortisol, which is one of your stress hormones. And when cortisol is chronically elevated, it increases blood sugar. The 5th thing you can do is just to stay hydrated and support your gut health. You want to try and drink plenty of filtered water to help your body flush out toxins and maintain metabolic balance. And to support your gut, you want to be eating fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, or other live cultured dairy, as well as fiber-rich vegetables to promote a healthy gut microbiome, which is a major regulator of the inflammation happening in your body. Last but not least, you can use natural anti-inflammatory compounds. Consider things like curcumin and turmeric, or ginger, or Ceylon cinnamon, or even apple cider vinegar. All of these have powerful anti-inflammatory properties. And if you're exploring different supplements, things like magnesium and vitamin D can also play essential roles in reducing chronic or systemic inflammation. By adopting these habits, you will naturally lower inflammation. You'll improve your cholesterol balance and reduce your risk of heart disease without relying on unnecessary medications. But ultimately, it's up to you. At the end of the day, you deserve all the information, and that's my goal on this channel, to provide you with the knowledge and tools that will help you live the longest and healthiest life possible. So if you want more of that, be sure to like and subscribe.